Good afternoon and welcome to the final installment of this academic year's Boost Your Skills webinar series, where we enlist the advice of specialist experts in order to help you make the most out of your university experience and to acquire the skills to help you succeed and develop both professionally and on a personal level. I am Siddharth, and joining me today are Jenny and Millie, and we are your Boost Your Skills team. This event is in webinar format, so you will not be able to turn on your cameras and mics, but we would still love to hear from you through the chat function. This is a safe space with no judgments being passed, so please feel free to ask questions without fear or worry. If you are still anxious, feel free to message us anonymously and we will pass it on. The webinar will consist of 6 10-minute chapters on the following topics: CVs, cover letters, networking, the right career for you, job hunting, and hiring managers and recruiters. If you have any relevant questions, please put it in the Q&A section, and there will also be some time at the end for Q&A. The event is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel, so don't worry if you've missed something. We'll be sharing a link to the videos and slides after the event. Finally, a big thank you to all our attendees who pre-submitted questions. Our guest today is Shannon Howard, founder of Walk of Life Coaching, the first ever international career development and talent advisory business focused on ESG, sustainability, diversity, and corporate responsibility. Shannon is an ICF certified coach and talent strategist with over 20 years experience and has worked with a number of large institutions, including Adobe, Deloitte, BlackRock, and WWF. Her book, Good Work, is available now from your student store with a 15% discount. So without further delay, I'd like to hand over to Shannon.
There we go. Hello, everyone. I'm unmuted now. Thank you for the warm welcome, Siddharth, and thank you for having me here today. I look forward to diving in and hearing everyone's questions. Just to kick off, I'm going to do a couple of slides just to introduce myself and a bit about the book and some of the content before the team asks their questions. And as Siddharth said, if you want to put questions into the chat as we're going through, we will weave those in throughout the session today, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A at the end as well. So please stay engaged on the chat as much as you can. So I have been in your shoes. I basically reinvented myself when I went back and got my master's degree back in 2003, when there weren't even programs at universities about sustainability or the environment yet. This was not on the agenda. So I've found myself really reinventing myself again and again in my career because I was constantly looking for something that had that impact or that sense of altruism. So I tried to be an accountant for many years, and then I was a management consultant and a corporate recruiter. I've also run my own ecotourism company down in southern Chile in Patagonia. So I've worn lots of different hats. And as Siddharth said, for some of the big brands like Adobe, Barclays, BlackRock, and then also the conservation organization WWF, I've also worked in boutique consultancies and in small businesses. So I've really had this full range of exposure in my career as I've built my own networks and skills along the way. But about 14 years ago, I was actually at Deloitte, and on my first day on the job, found out I was pregnant. And that was not the best job to have, being pregnant, because it's pretty full on working in management consulting in central London. So I started to realize I might need to be reinventing myself again, and thought about what it is that I really love to do. And what I loved most about my career to date had been the connecting people through the recruitment. So getting the right people into the right jobs, and writing resumes and CVs, and helping people to really figure out what is their purpose and what is their passion, and how can we turn that into a paid role. So I launched Walk of Life Coaching about 14 years ago, and really wanted it to be something that is serving the candidate, right? The job seeker, because we've got lots of recruitment agencies out there that are doing marketing for companies and trying to find them top talent, but there was nobody really supporting the candidate back then. And now you'll see there's a lot of career coaches in the market, but mine is always really specifically focused on this ESG, environment, social governance, now called ESG, corporate responsibility, so sustainability, all these kinds of issues that are so prominent for us and so front of mind with what's happening to our planet. But back then, there wasn't that much support. So what I did was created a 14-step program that really breaks down the career change process so that it's easy for you to know what to do when, which templates, which tools do you need to be working on before you go to the next one, and really how to navigate what can sometimes be a bit overwhelming and scary process of going out to find a job. So I've packaged all that into the book, Good Work, and also into an online course, a group coaching program as well, and some one-on-one coaching programs. And today I'll just walk you through a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is the same content that's in the book and in the online course. So one of my favorite quotes is, "The only way to be truly satisfied is to do work you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and do not settle." And I know that sounds kind of easy for Steve Jobs to say to some degree, but I really believe this. And so, as you're starting out your careers as recent graduates, really being particular and discerning about where do you want to end up? What kinds of work, what kinds of things do you want to be working on every day, and with what kinds of people and with what type of company, in terms of not just sector, but also what kinds of ethical leadership do you want to be working under? Because that really sets the culture for the whole organization, doesn't it? So I'm just going to walk you quickly through my kind of 14-step program, just so you kind of know what's covered in the book. And then again, we're going to go into more detail on this in our Q&A. So the first part is really about the market landscape. So how do you unpack the trends of what's happening in the market? How do you understand what ESG or sustainability really means for you? And who are the key players? Who do you need to start following and caring about and knowing? The second one is called Aim Your Compass. And this is where we're going to get you more vetted about who do you want to really target as your audience and as your next step in your career. And really overcoming the blocks that you might have of thinking, oh, I don't know enough about this issue, or I don't know enough about this sector. I don't know if I should even go there, but helping you really to push through some of those fears and realize that you can actually make this happen for yourself. You can make this a reality. The third part of the series is called Map Your Story. And this is where we get into those juicy bits of creating your personal brand stories on paper. So a lot of people will jump straight into job boards and then redo their resume and CVs 10 different times for 10 different audiences. But what I really focus you in on is getting targeted first so that you know who your audience is, and you can then better develop what I call your marketing materials. So this is really a marketing exercise, and you're the product. So we want to be able to dissect those job descriptions, really understand what they're looking for, and start to translate your skills and competencies and achievements to date from your education, from maybe volunteering, from things you did in the summer. So we build a story about who are you. For those of us that are recruiters, reading 200 resumes and CVs a day, it gets old, right? So we want to be bringing those stories, those personal stories about where you've been and where you want to go next to life. And then the last part is part 4, and this is where we step into the market and get you really ready to launch your job search with powerful networking. How do you interview? How do you write a bio about yourself that isn't a resume, so that you can actually go out and present to your networks without it looking like you're a desperate job seeker, that you're really actually someone that has something to offer more than just wanting something from them. And we'll look at LinkedIn as well and the interview skills in this last section. So it's an iterative process, as you can see. It all builds upon each other. Each step builds on the last one. And it's a really, very simple, laid out toolkit that gives you exactly what you need in each stage. And some of the tools that are included both in the book and in the online course are listed here. So we've got everything from, mapping your dream job. What could that really look like? What are you passionate about? What do you love doing? How much money do you want to make? There could be lots of different things that are criteria for you about what you think you want from this postgraduate, position when you step into the market. Looking at some of your fears, some of your blocks, but also starting to build up those marketing tools. So everything from CV cover letter, bio, LinkedIn, even an elevator pitch. And how do you talk about yourself in person? It's easy to get all this written out in perfect language, but then when you have to talk about it live, it gets a little bit scarier. So all the way down to those interview prep tips. It's all packed into the book, but even more so into the online course. So we've got lots of people in my network that I've worked with over the years that have given lovely quotes about the book and what they're saying. Andy Cartland was who I launched the program with initially through Acre Recruitment out of London. They're now in New York and also Amsterdam. Dave Stanges is one of the practitioners and leaders in this space in the US. He was leading sustainability for Campbell's Soup for many years and now also is working in private equity. And then Katie Cross is coming from a university, and she's always been leading on this through the environmental program at Duke University. Don't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, but what problems they want to solve. This changes the conversation from who do I want to work for to what do I need to learn to be able to do that. And I love this. If you guys can all jot down the problem you want to solve. So what do you want to give back? What do you want to shape different, something different? What kind of change do you want to make in the world? And use that as that kind of pillar or that core to drive you as you go out into the jobs market. So I look forward to continuing staying in touch with many of you all, even though I'm not seeing your lovely faces today. So I just thought I would give you some ways to stay in touch and support you in your upcoming job searches. I do post a lot of free content on my website and also on my LinkedIn. So right now, I know Siddharth said that there's a 15% discount at the bookstore for you to get the book, but you can also get a 25% discount through my publisher right now. They're hosting a special sale on koganpage.com. So feel free to hop on there if you want to get a copy for yourself. I think that runs until May 1st. So you'd probably need to do it before next week it is, I guess. And then if Siddharth put this into the chat, which is just a link, if you want to get some free resources from me, specifically one about how to work with recruiters, then you can just put your name and email into once you go through the link, and that'll sign you up to get to be able to download one of our free tools. We always like free things, don't we? So also just please, let's connect on social media. Again, I post a lot of hot jobs and lots of free content and tips and events. And I have a pretty good network in there, so you can get access and see a lot of the people that are key players in this sustainability space. LinkedIn is probably my go-to social media platform. I do use the others, but LinkedIn's the best place to connect with me, follow me, and look at Walk of Life coaching as well. And then if you want to carry on and do any other additional work together, there's lots of different ways to learn with me, and you get a discount on the group coaching if you use the JS Group code, JS Group 23. So every little bit helps, and we're launching our next group coaching on the 6th of June. So let's turn it over now back to Siddharth and Jenny and Millie, and I'm all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm going to dive straight in and start with CVs, but I'm just going to remind everyone that if you have any questions at any points while we're talking, just pop them in the chat and we will chuck those into our conversations as well. So if anything pops up in your mind that you want answered, say it right then and there so we can make sure we're answering it. And I think if we could just stop sharing, can you stop sharing your screen, Shannon? That's perfect. Then we can see everyone's faces a bit better. So the first question that I have for you is, what are some of the myths for writing a compelling CV? So we've heard a few things over the years of different styles and fonts that can make you stand out, or that you only need one CV, but yes. We're here to find out the real answer. So over to you, Shannon.
Yes, the real answer. So yes, there's a lot of CV advice out there, isn't there, on the internet, and it gets a little bit overwhelming. I think probably there's a couple of myths, or things that we think we're supposed to do on a CV to make it more outstanding that sometimes backfire. So I'm going to start with those. Special styles and fonts. So I see a lot of CVs now that have like something down the left, like a border or different fonts and colors, or trying to put things in different order. And if you think about it from a recruiter's perspective, who's your reader or your audience, whether it's a hiring manager within a company or a recruiter from an agency, we are reading your application in 6 seconds. That's it.
Really
that's
short.
Yeah, that's quick.
That is literally what we will do, at least on our first read. So in that 6 seconds, I need to be able to very quickly and easily be convinced that you're worth staying on the page for. And if there's a lot of fancy formatting and things are in different places that I'm used to seeing them, and there's lots of different fonts that are offsetting or lines or things, I am going to want to get off the page. So this is a little bit psychological, right? That you want to make it as clean, simple, and clear, and impress me with your story, not with your fonts and your fancy styles. So that means don't hide behind those things, right? Take the time that you're going to spend making it look pretty and different, and use that time to actually tell a more compelling story about where you're going next. What is your objective? What do you want to do next? And how does what you've done to date get you prepared for that? So when you're an undergrad, you probably think, oh, well, I don't have any experience. Well, that's just not true, right? Because you've all done things within your programs at university. You've done things in extracurriculars. You've had volunteer opportunities. You maybe had a summer job. Really, anything and everything you've done needs to go on the page if it's going to be relevant to that audience about where you're going next. You're probably just going to have a one-pager for when you start out your career. Later, once you've got 5+ years experience, you could probably then go to a maximum of a 2-pager. I actually wrote my son's resume CV the other day, and he's just turned 15. He's got no experience. He's got no work experience. He's never, I don't even think, done anything for pay, really. But I filled a page. He's 15. And I filled that page with all of his interests and extracurricular things and sports and leadership. A lot of the leadership he's done at university. The fact that he knows all the flags in the world, silly stuff like that just shows your interest or shows you the way your brain works or shows, the kinds of things you're curious about. So you don't necessarily want to just say, I like reading and the movies and hanging out with my friends. We're not going to put those kinds of things on a resume, on a CV. But if you've done any of those things in a way that you can position them to tell an interesting story, like I started a film club, or, I read a historical novel every one a week, or things like that, where you can actually bring it to life and tell me a little bit more, that CV is going to come to life, isn't it? I'm going to want to stay on the page and know you and read more. So if you pass the 6-second test, I'll stay on the page 1 to 2 minutes. It's still not very long. So again, we need to make it so easy for the reader to quickly grasp exactly who you are, what your skills are, what you've achieved to date that you think is relevant to what they're looking for. So do we need multiple CVs for multiple audiences? That used to be the way we do it, but we don't do it that way anymore. We develop a one template CV that's going to work 80% of the time. And for each application, you're going to be putting in with maybe a cover letter or a piece of work that they're asking for, whatever those requirements are, you're going to be wanting to tell that story in a way that's consistent with who the audience is. So we have to figure out who the audience is first. We've got to do the targeting piece first. Are you most interested in banking and financial services? Does that get you excited? Or do you want to work in a product company that has a supply chain and is making stuff? Do you want to work in a big company? Do you want to work in a brand that's well known? Do you want to be able to wear lots of different hats in a smaller organization? All of that mapping needs to happen first, because if we don't do that, you're basically just telling everyone the same story and it's not going to resonate enough. So when you get to the point of actually applying to jobs, that's when you can adjust your template CV by up to 20%. But if you're changing your story by more than 20%, there's too many versions of you and you've got too many target audiences. And you're probably thinking, but I'm willing to do anything. I don't know what I want to do. I'll work anywhere. I just want a job. I just want to start, earning some money. Yes, and there's a lot of you out there, right? There's a lot of recent grads with lots of, interesting stories about their lives to date that have made good grades and, can tell a decent story. So there is competition. And that's why we've got to do the groundwork about this process and not assume that it's just a quick and easy thing where I can just keep reinventing myself for every single audience and one of them will stick. That might work. And being junior, as in starting out your career, you're going to end up having more opportunities and seeing where you fit best. You might not have all the answers right now. And even those of us that have been working for 20 years don't always have the answers and know exactly who our target audience is. But doing that groundwork first is going to help you write a better CV story. And we have LinkedIn. So most of us recruiters are going to vet you on LinkedIn and on your social media. We're going to look at your Instagram. We're going to look at your Facebook. And if your story is inconsistent, or you're saying things on one platform and then changing it completely on another, or you're telling me that you're ethical and then, there you are, I don't know, doing something crazy on Facebook, that's all part of your story. So it's all of your social media is actually part of your job application. That's all public now, right? So again, we don't get a chance to have 5, 10 different stories about ourselves or profiles on LinkedIn. We only get one. And so that one story has got to resonate for most of those target audiences that you're going to be applying to. Usually you're not going to be changing LinkedIn for every application. But again, you can change up to 20% of your template CV and cover letter to make it customized for each application, because every company sector is going to be looking at or using different semantics. And those semantics, for us in sustainability, some people call it sustainable business. Some people call it ESG now. Some people call it sustainability. Some people might say climate change. Some people might talk about human rights. We've got to match that. We've got to match their semantics and their language so that, again, we're more compelling and relevant. But that doesn't mean you're changing your whole story. It just means that you're swapping out a few keywords to make sure that you're actually matching their language. So another example is your skills. And that's one thing I have you do before you even start your CV is to map out your top 4 skills. And that's really saying, well, what do you want to do with your, what do you like doing? What is it that you enjoy? What goes to the top of the list in your coursework or in your private personal time? What do you really get excited about doing? So it's a task or a skill. And once you've got your 4 skills kind of mapped out, that kind of becomes your framework for building your personal brand story. And we're going to then tell the story about those 4 skills through what I call achievement statements. And those achievement statements, maybe you only have 1 per skill. Maybe you have 3. It doesn't matter, really. We're not going to have more than 3 for the 4. So you never, even if you have 30 years experience like I do, you're not going to have more than 12 achievement statements on a CV later in your career. Now, you might only have 1 achievement statement per skill, and that's fine. But we do want to be able to tell that story about what you've achieved in the past in another context that's going to be relevant for the job that you're applying to. So I'll leave it there. That's a lot about the CV. I'm throwing a lot at you. Obviously, there's a lot more in the book, but I'll leave it back to you, Jenny, to see if we have any questions in the chat and if you have any follow-up questions for that.
We haven't had any questions in the chat. I just have a quick question. So would you say that the most important thing to have at the top of your CV to catch that person's attention is a statement about yourself? That's the best way to catch the recruiter's attention within the 6 seconds?
Yes, if it's written well. So when I see a statement that's something like, experienced thought leader, looking to make a difference, you've lost me, because I can put that on anyone's CV, right? It sounds kind of good, but nah. So we don't use words that are subjective. We use words that are actually, we clean out all the subjective words, like successfully did this, or, something that kind of is bigging you up. We want to just show the audience rather than tell the audience, if that makes sense. So we would say something like, recent geography graduate with 3 years of volunteer experience helping to, advance issues around climate change in the context of, consumer goods companies or something like that. We want to get as specific as possible. So you're only going to have one statement. I need a little bit of all of that in there. However, when you get a little more further on in your career, even now, you could do a 4-line profile section. That's what I usually do with my clients. So the first one is kind of, what's the title you're aiming for in the next role? How many years of experience doing what do you have, and in what sectors? And then the second sentence would be more about what are those diverse skills, but spelling them out a little bit more than just saying communications or, project management. We want to kind of describe those skills in that profile section. And then anything else that might be interesting. So I did one this week, and he was like a champion skier for certain teams in the US. And I've had other people that have, said that they've started a nonprofit, or, any of those little nuggets that maybe you're like, I'm kind of proud of that. That's actually probably pretty interesting, even though maybe you're not applying to be a ski instructor and you're not applying to work at an NGO. It still shows something about you and your commitment in your life to date. So yes, simple answer, Jenny, is yes. I like the profile section at the top. And the way I would look at that is as a mini bio. So if that's all I read in my 6 seconds to 1 minute read, I would have a really solid picture of where you've been and where you, and how that's the relevant bits about where you've been for me, the reader, that might want to help you get to that next stage in your career. A question that comes up sometimes around that section is about your objective. So we used to put objective statements up in there. You can do that, but I, again, find that that's a little bit more about the aspiration rather than the history of what's relevant about what you can do for me. So I don't mind if you put a little bit of that in there, like, one thing that we say if you don't have a lot of experience in ESG issues is you could say, committed to shaping change around climate change, energy, waste, and water, right? But if you're going to tell me you're committed to that, I'm still going to want to know a little bit of that personal story. It doesn't mean you're a subject matter expert, doesn't mean you've worked in it, but you're telling me and defining yourself about what are those issues you really care about that you want to make a difference in. And I think that's a little more compelling than like objective is to get get on a graduate scheme, in a big Fortune, FTSE 250 company. That one doesn't impress me as much, right? So again, but that's a place where you can do a lot more of the customization for each of the applications when you get to that point.
We have had a few questions put in the chat. So one, I suppose it sort of ties in with when I used to recruit temporary students in our campus bookshop. I found that a lot of students put their education before their job history because that's what they're doing right now and that's what they're really proud of. And so part of the question is, is there a rule of what should go first and what should go second? And that sort of ties in a little bit with the question that's gone into the chat of would it be a good idea to state the modules that the student has done that are relevant to the job that they're applying for in their CV?
Both really good questions and easy, easy to answer. So in terms of the modules, we don't want to just list keywords of the title of the class, right? So, but we do want to be keyword searchable, especially on LinkedIn or even in applicant tracking systems. However, if you could weave those keywords of the course name into, again, an achievement statement. So what did you do in that geography class? Or what did you do in that sustainable business course, right? So did you write a paper? Did you research companies? Which ones? How many? How long was the paper? Did you present it to a group? How big was the group? You know, how many, I don't know, slides did you develop? You know, anything that gives us the specifics to understand what you actually did in that class. Because as we know, there's plenty of students out there that just sit there and listen in a class or don't even go to the class and still get credit for the class. So we want to know what you did when you attended those courses, rather than just giving me a laundry list of all your course titles. And selectively picking those so that they're the ones that are relevant would be good. Yeah. But most of us as recruiters have a general sense of what's covered in most of these degree programs. So we haven't, you know, we already know that you kind of are going to have a general sense of XYZ, but we won't in terms of knowledge, but we won't know what you actually have in terms of skills. So we're always trying to tell a story that's a balance between skills and knowledge or content. Sorry, that was your second question, Jenny. Remind me your first question again.
Which should come first, education or employment history?
Yeah. So if you're a recent grad and, well, I usually say just an easy answer is if the thing that you did most recently was education, then that can go at the top. So think of it kind of in a chronological sense. However, after you've gotten your first job, or maybe you've had an internship that's more relevant than your education, you're going to want that at the top. So whatever is the more relevant, even if it's not chronologically correct, once you've got some experience under your belt, you're going to always want to lead with the experience. And the education drops below that. If you don't feel like you have a lot of relevant experience yet, and the education is the most relevant piece, then build out that section with those achievement statements, and you can leave experience below it.
Perfect. There's one more question, which I think is probably a question that a lot of people struggle with, and that is, what's the best way to explain a gap in your CV? And this person in particular is returning to work after extended parental leave, which is probably quite a common reason. Do you still have to do that? Are people still asking for those reasons?
Great. Yeah, great question. I mean, there's lots of different reasons we might be out of work, right? Especially in the context of the crazy jobs market right now, and a lot of people getting laid off. And I find that a lot of us think that we need to be apologetic about a gap, whether it's to care for an elderly parent or to have a baby, or we got laid off, or whatever it is. And I can't actually speak for all recruiters, but for me as a recruiter, I tend to say, I don't need you to apologize by telling me about it on a resume. I want to know what's relevant. And if that's relevant to what you want to do next, then include it. If it's not, it's fine to have a gap. If it's 10 years out, I work with a lot of women coming back to work after they've had children and they've taken 5 or 10 years to raise their kids. Well, as we all know, that's the hardest job in the universe, right? Is to raise children. So tell us a little bit, you don't want to say I've changed X number of nappies and, booked X number of play dates, but there are things that are their skill set in parenting. So if there's anything in there that you think is relevant to what kind of role you're applying for, you can include it and make it kind of fun. But you don't need to apologize or kind of fill gaps of timelines if it's not relevant, to be honest. it distracts the reader as well, right? So you're kind of putting it out there. So what that would be if that person said, 10 years out of the workforce for parenting, I'd be like, oh, then this person is stale and maybe not relevant anymore and doesn't know how to use a computer, or I don't know, or like has baby brain. So it makes me start thinking stuff, which you don't want me to think. You want me to know that it's not relevant. So I don't need to know it. Does that answer that a little bit? I mean, it's a subtlety, right? And it's very personal. And some people want to share that. Some people take a year off and travel around the world. Other people start a business and it fails. There's lots of us that have different stories. So I think, again, that's your decision as to what you want to share. But always go back to the question, is it relevant to my future audience, to the reader?
Thank you very much. I think we'll move on to cover letters now. But if anyone does have any extra CV questions while we're going through everything, just pop them in the chat or the Q&A section and we will come back to them at the end. Thank you very much. So over to you, Millie.
Yeah, so telling a story with your CV is definitely one thing. And I think cover letters are quite different, but also have to tell a story about you, I guess. And I think a lot of people don't know where to start. Are they even read? You said 6 seconds on a CV. Are they going to bother with my cover letter? What's the structure? What's the length and things like that? So I think there's a lot of questions about cover letters. They're a bit mysterious, really. So I was wondering, what's your take on them?
Yes, Millie, you're going to love this. My first blog that I wrote when I launched my business was Kill the Cover Letter, because as a candidate and as a recruiter, we hate them. So why are we doing them? Let's just kill the cover letter. So the quick answer is we don't really read them, to be honest. However, we still require them. So we kind of still have to do them. So what we want to do in the cover letter is be a little bit more personable, right? So we're going to want to talk and link our passions and our interests to the homework we've done on the company and on the role, right? And you want it to be almost more conversationally written, right? The resume is very formal. The CV is written in third person, whereas the cover letter is going to be first person. So it's a way for you to connect with your audience, but you don't want to bore your audience and you don't want to put things in there that look like you lifted it from a cover letter template. So I talk about it as writing a love letter. And when I was actually 25, I wanted to move from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. And I really wanted to work in fashion. And I found my dream job back in the day. It was in the newspaper. We used to find jobs in the newspaper, which really dates me, but found my dream job in the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm like, I have to get this job. Like, this is it. So I literally wrote them, and it was for an accounting role. So a very dry role, but I was like, I got to tell them why I'm in love with the company and why this is it. This is my dream job. And I literally did that. I wrote a love letter. And I had never done accounting. I didn't even know how to do a bank reconciliation. And they flew me out there for an interview. And I studied for 8 hours before that interview because I knew there was going to be a bank recon as part of it. And I just winged it. But they hired me for my potential and my passion and my ability to kind of step out of, the framework of what everybody else does. So the reason I'm telling that story is, you don't want to go off on a complete tangent. And this was a fashion company, right? So they could take some of this. I don't know if you do the same thing for a bank or an oil company or whatever, but, know your audience again, know your audience well, and tell them why. Why them? Why have you picked them out of all the companies in the world, out of all the organizations you could go and invest your time in to give back to their bottom line or whatever it is they're achieving? Tell me that story. And sometimes I think it's easier to write cover letters verbally. So you could sit down with a friend or family member or even into your iPhone and just answer the question, what do you know about me, the company? Why do you want to work for me, the company? What are you going to do for me? Why do you stand out? Why should I hire you over someone else? And give me 5 bullet points about what you've done in the past that show your journey to date has set you up for this dream job. And that's it. Just make it a letter, really truly make it a letter. Don't try to make it stifled and kind of stiff and too formal. I want to see personality in a cover letter. That will make me read it as well. But also, you don't want a lot of text. So I'd say you have a couple of intro paragraphs, not very long, very punchy. And then maybe you give a line, my key achievements related to this role are, or my impact to date has been, and give me 5 bullet points that just kind of summarize your whole life. So instead of saying, I did project X for company Y, you're going to say, I've project managed 3 projects of up to 100,000 pounds over 4 years at my university. So you're kind of collapsing your whole journey to date into 5 bullet points that quickly summarize it all and kind of build up almost the headlines. If you think about it as almost like the headline, then I'm like, ooh, I want to know more about that. So then I'm going to go to the CV and read more about it.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those bullet points as well, they let you be focused on kind of, instead of going on a tangent, like you said, a love letter could be a few love letters, whereas it actually keeps you focused on why you're here. And I think that's really important. We have had someone in the chat say that where they work, the cover letters are the most important bit of their application. So would you say, do your research on the company maybe as to their application process?
Definitely. Every company is different, right? And things are changing and evolving. I never ask for cover letters anymore when I work for doing corporate recruiting. I always ask for a statement of interest, and I'll ask 5 specific questions, and I'll give you a word limit. So, you could do that in reverse, right? So instead of writing a big, long cover letter, you could just say, instead of writing a boring cover letter, I'm going to write a statement of interest and why I want this job. And then you almost answer the 5 questions you think they should be asking you, so you can mix it up like that and do it a little bit more in a unique way that's authentic to you. So it's got to really be your authentic voice. It is your chance to show personality, and it is your chance to show your writing skills. So the company that probably really values those cover letters are looking for those types of things. But I think when I say kill the cover letter, it's because they got so dry and so boring and so formulaic that, again, if you're reading 200 of them a day, that's really pretty dire. But I agree that they can be really valuable if you use them to communicate both your personality, and your writing skills and things like that, and to connect.
Absolutely. And I think that links on quite nicely to networking, which is where we're going to head to next, I think, Siddharth.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, perfect segue. So actually, this is interesting because networking is something that, as I was finishing up with my university as well, it was something that was constantly thrown at us. And we were told that, look, it's not just enough to know what what you want to do, but you need to know people within the field and you need to know people around you. It seems to be key in landing a job these days. And a lot of things that I had a lot of friends who were a bit more introverted. As you can see, I like talking a lot, so I was okay. But I have a lot of friends who are a bit more introverted, and they would say stuff like, well, I'm not really a schmoozer, so I don't really know how I can get good at networking. So what are your views basically? And what are the myths on networking that you could possibly bust for us, Shannon?
Yeah, well, that's one of the myths. I'm not a schmoozer, so I can't be good at networking. I personally, I'm an extrovert to some degree, and the word networking freaks me out. I just do not like it. I don't like the thought of like having to network, and there's something very salesy sounding about it and like awkward. And so the way I talk about networking is I reframe it so we can trick our brains by reframing our language around things, right? So instead of calling it networking, you can call it making new friends, right? And those friends are equals. And so networking, to me, there's some sort of like disparity between where that person is and where I am or where I want to be. And so there's always this like gap. And I think if we just think about it as I'm bringing value and I'm bringing an offer, which is my skill set, my knowledge, whatever it is, my personality even to the team or culture of this organization, my value is as valuable as their value. So it's starting to get that confidence around we're all on the same journey and the same mission to make a difference or to make a living or to improve products and services or to, whatever it is, that if we go in thinking we're all kind of equals, and that person probably doesn't like networking either, right? And so we're all human and we're all really equals at that point. And so I think if we can overcome that kind of disparity of hierarchy in the job process, it helps a lot. And I know that's not an easy thing to do, but it's about knowing your own value and knowing what you're bringing to the table. So that's why I don't even start the networking part until like step 13 of my 14 steps, because you've got to have done all that other groundwork first to know what your value is and to be confident in talking about that naturally. And then networking doesn't seem that scary, I've written a lot about this on my blog, so you can go in and just type in the keyword networking and find some juicy bits on my website. But also there's a chapter in the book. But basically for me, networking, the key to networking is really, it's a win-win conversation. And I think what we do as job seekers is we often go out and say, I saw your profile and you look really interesting. And you've got this amazing career. I'd love to learn more from you about how you got where you are. Or I'm a recent graduate and I'm looking to learn more about consumer goods. And, you're in marketing at Unilever. So I'd love to talk to you and learn more. Yes, and those people don't have time, right? So you're going to end up sending all these out and not getting the responses that you want. And then you're going to be in a downward spiral of confidence. If you went out to those people and said, I'm hosting a podcast, or I'm writing a research article for a paper or a blog or, something, or a white paper or something. Could I feature you? Could I interview you? Or could I get a quote from you for an article I'm doing? Or can I invite you to be a panelist at this event that I'm hosting? Or I saw this great article about, the trends of consumer goods marketing with a sustainability lens, and I thought it might be interesting to you. I'd love to have a conversation and tell you some of the latest trends I've seen through my marketing course at XYZ University. So you're bringing something to the table, or you're offering something to that person. You're not just doing an ask. And that shows maturity, it shows professionalism, and it also shows the fact that this is a two-way conversation, that we're always out to help each other. We're never just going in for an ask. And the more specific you can be about your ask, the more likely they're going to do it. So the next follow-up to that would be, I'd love it if you could put me in touch with 3 other marketing directors in London at FTSE 250 companies. I see you're connected with so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. Here's a blurb of how you can introduce me. Would you mind just copying and pasting this into LinkedIn and introducing me to these 3 people? You've done all the work for me. You've researched who you want me to put you in touch with. You've given me the blurb to do it, so I don't have to think about what to write. You've made it so easy for me to act and help you. If you just want to have a chat, I don't have time. So the more specific you can be about what you can bring to them, what you need from them, and doing the groundwork for them to deliver on that need of what you're asking, the more likely you're going to get results. Now, there's all different types of networking, right? You could be at an event. Again, you could be reaching out to ask them to put you in touch with someone else on LinkedIn. That's a second connection. It could be you really do want to have a chat about their career and their company. So you've got to alter this a little bit depending on, your setting and the context. But if you lead with the win-win, so they're gaining, you're gaining, and you lead with a specific ask, you're going to greatly increase your chances of getting that kind of traction with those people.
Amazing. Oh, thank you very much. That's very helpful. And you mentioned something which actually, again, leads right into the next question, which is actually about LinkedIn and how important that is in networking. And you'd mentioned it before as part of, you used a term which I liked, which said marketing yourself as a product. And I think, especially in today's environment, LinkedIn is quite a pivotal feature in that. So what would you say would be the best ways of using LinkedIn? And do you just copy your CV directly into it and then just kind of go from there? Or would you spend more time curating it a bit more differently?
All good questions. LinkedIn, you should be on LinkedIn all day, every day, connecting, writing content, engaging with people. LinkedIn is your number one tool. There's no getting around it. It's the most important social media platform that you have for building your networks, learning from others, gaining expertise, engaging with people, showing your relevance, building your own gravitas. It's not just for job seekers. That's another myth about LinkedIn. But as a job seeker, it is your number one tool for sure. So you want to make sure that you're setting up your job alerts on those keywords. You want to you can access so many people on LinkedIn. I mean, if you think about this 20 years ago, we did not have LinkedIn. So we only had our inner circle of people that we knew, and we had them in our, Rolodex and like a phone number or maybe an email, whereas now you can go out and research sectors, titles of people, company names, and you can see how you're connected through your second connections if you're not a first with some of these people. It's a gold mine of researching your market and your target audience. The other thing is that many people will put a decent amount of content in their about section, or which I call as a bio, or in their experience, and they'll use keywords, and you can start to get a sense of how are the people in that organization talking about themselves. Oh, I can start to mirror some of that language. So short, having a actual job description for a live opening, you can go in there and start to use LinkedIn to help you rebrand yourself or help you build up your own language about how you want to talk about yourself. It is just a huge resource, honestly. I think, So now let me just tie networking back for a minute, because one thing about networking is I always say you should be spending 80% of your time, of your job search time, networking, talking to humans, engaging with people, and 20% of your time on job boards. So if you put the clock on, I suspect you're doing the opposite. I suspect you're doing 80% of the time hiding behind a screen, hiding behind job boards, and just kind of reactively responding to the market versus really getting out there, connecting with people, making yourself relevant, doing those win-win conversations. It seems like more work, but your return is much quicker and it's much more quality. And it is a mindset shift because it's just a different way of doing the job search now. It was very different 30 years ago, for sure, or even 15 years ago. And again, we will vet you on LinkedIn. We will also search for you on LinkedIn as recruiters. So when I have a job opening, the first thing I do is I go on LinkedIn and I type in, whether it's the sector, a company name, or keywords to see who I know in my personal network that could help me find the right talent. So you want to have those relevant keywords on LinkedIn so that you're searchable. LinkedIn is your public CV in essence, but it's also a platform to engage, obviously, and to share your knowledge and content and be relevant. But as your public CV, there might be things on your CV that you're able to share, but that you wouldn't necessarily want out on LinkedIn. It could be that you're changing jobs, but you're already still in a job. It could be that you've got company names on your CV that you can divulge, but you can't really say them on LinkedIn. So you just have to be conscious of that obviously it's a public platform. But it's also a beautiful way to connect, make a great photo of yourself and tell me what is your mission in life? And, again, make your story come to life on LinkedIn. I think it's a beautiful platform to be able to, again, be more personable, use the first person, and really to shape a story that, again, I'm going to skim it. So you're not going to put a lot of content in there. So don't go crazy, but a one-liner for each job or a bio in the about section, again, with bullet points, making things quite punchy, easy for me to pop around and see the bits that I need to see to get a sense of who you are and where you've come from. But I would say do that after you've done the CV work, because the CV work should be really building your kind of core storyline. And then you'll know what's relevant to bring into LinkedIn. You might not put everything you've ever done into LinkedIn, right? Especially as you get further on in your career, you might take some things out or leave some things out. Or you might want them all there, because what if somebody, when I worked at Adobe 20 years ago, might be looking for me and can't find me, and they'd be looking for somebody that worked at Adobe and, back in the early 2000s. So I keep a lot of that in there, but you don't have to overwhelm your LinkedIn profile with everything you've ever done. And on the same note, or on a contrary to that, is it might be a place that you do want to put a lot of what you've always ever done, because you have it like in one place rather than trying to fit it all into a CV. And that might change over the years. LinkedIn can kind of become a database for you of some of your achievements and your publications, or where you volunteered. So use it as I think also as a fluid platform. So you can update it. I change mine all the time. I'm constantly updating it and changing it. So I almost say that's more fluid than the CV. The CV, I almost want, that's your template. You're going with that. Don't be changing it too much. But LinkedIn, you can kind of try to stay a little bit more up to date and relevant in there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was, I wish I knew some of these when I was setting, I still can use some of it, but I wish I knew when I was setting it up. But, thank you so much.
Never too late, Siddharth.
There was a question about how to use LinkedIn, but I think you've actually kind of covered most of it. So I'm just going to move on to Jenny's question about careers. So, yeah.
So, so I think we were sort of talking about before this event, so Millie and Siddharth and I were talking about how you can get really caught up in sort of trying to make yourself be the best person for a company and almost forget to check if they're the right company for you. So, and there's two angles to this. Is this the right job for you? But also, is the company itself the right company for you? So the sort of myth that we've put in is all I have to do is get on the ladder and I can sort my career out later. But there's sort of two prongs to that, the actual job and the company.
Yep. Okay. Yes, I hate that word ladder though, don't you? It just makes me think I gotta be climbing up something. Someone told me once, I had a best friend who was at Deloitte in the US, and she said they started calling it the lattice. So you didn't have to kind of, not all of us want to keep climbing the ladder, do we? But we all do need to own our own career development and our own career plan. And so part of sorting out your career later is actually sorting out your career now, because each thing that you do in your life or in your jobs is, again, part of your story. So you're building it as you go. So for instance, when I was an undergrad, I kind of loved the whole CV thing. I already knew I loved like writing CVs and helping people connect for jobs. So I took a role as a recruiter. And realized, I didn't really love it as much as I thought I did, but I learned a lot. And so I kind of did 2 years of recruitment and then I got out of it. But then like almost 30 years later, I've come full circle, 25 years later, and now I use my recruitment skills and I do recruitment again. So it'll be interesting to see when you look back on those early stages of your career. It's still you, it's still authentic you. And there's pieces of that you're going to say, I loved that, I didn't like that, or I want to do more of this, or that I never want to do again. So things like my accounting background, I realized I loved it. And actually, I probably could do bookkeeping again. I still love doing that kind of thing, but I didn't want to do it 24/7 as my career. So I took that language off of my resume and stopped using that language because it wasn't as relevant. And I might have started to reconvert that into data analysis or being good with numbers or, budgeting. So every step you take is leading you to the next step. So each step needs to be strategic. Each step needs to be intentional. And each step needs to be aligned with your authentic self. And you always are managing your career because no one else is going to do it for you. Even in the most, savvy companies, they don't really do it for you. So you're always going to have to be kind of a step ahead of where do you want to be going next? What kind of skills do you need to be building? What kind of knowledge? What kind of people do you need in your network to get to that next stage in your career? And you need to start that now. Just start practicing it now, because that first job is going to be really pretty instrumental in setting you out for the rest of your career. In order to know, I get asked the question a lot similar to this, Jenny, is that how do I know if the company is going to be the right company for me, right? You read all this blah, blah online on their website, and it's all written by their comms teams and I have one rule for that. If you have narrowed it down to 2 or 3 companies you want to target, or 2 or 3 companies you've applied to, and you're kind of getting into the interview rounds, and you really want to know which one do I pick, or is this really the right place for me? The first thing is trust your instinct. So you have an inner voice that usually speaks up, but our ego, wanting that job and just be done with the job search and just make some money, overrides that inner voice. So make sure you have a good conversation between the ego and that instinct and inner voice, because that inner voice is almost always going to be right. That's one thing. The second thing is talk to people that used to work for that organization. So they're not there anymore, because the people that are there are still going to be ambassadors for that brand or that company, aren't they? They might not tell you the whole truth. And also a lot of them don't really want to talk to job seekers. But when you reach out to somebody and they used to work at that company, they're more likely to talk to you for some reason. And I don't really know why, but it's like, they're kind of like, oh yeah, I've done that, so I can now be a little more open. And you end up finding out a lot of things that you'd be surprised comes out of those conversations. And sometimes people will just respond to you on an email. So you can ask them 3 questions and they'll just shoot you back an answer. So that's another way to do that instead of asking for a phone call. But I would never take a job that you haven't vetted the company with ex-employees, because there will be messaging in there. Maybe they're disgruntled, maybe they were laid off. You got to take it all into context, but they usually will tell you the truth. So have your questions framed so that you're getting the kinds of answers that you're really deep dive looking for. The other thing that you can do in the interview process is ask really revealing questions of the hiring manager or who is going to be your manager. And that could be anything from, tell me about a time when you had an issue with an employee that worked for you and how you handled that. Or talk to me a little bit about how the leadership engages with people that are in the graduate scheme. You can also just do the research too on what does their C-suite talk about in social media? What kind of platforms what are they using as their, messaging? Because the C-suite down is really what sets that culture into motion. But you need to know your boss pretty well and what kind of manager and how are they going to handle things if things get a little sticky. And you need to know the kind of culture from that top-down C-suite and how that is being how that's really being played out. Because again, we don't want to just read website stuff because that's a little too shiny. We want to know the real nitty gritty of what does that actually look like in practice. And you could ask those questions in interviews.
There was actually a question, sorry, Shannon. There's a question about Glassdoor. I don't know if you've heard of it, but if Glassdoor is decent as a research tool for company research, or if you have any recommendations.
Yeah, you have to think of it, it's almost like TripAdvisor, right? You go on TripAdvisor and it's all the people that are pissed off and annoyed and disgruntled. And it's similar to Glassdoor. When we're happy about things, we don't usually tend to go write the feedback. When we're annoyed and angry, we're like, let me tell everybody. So I think you get a little bit of a, you might not get the full story from Glassdoor. And I find that their salaries are often not very telling. So take that as one of your research tools, but don't use it at face value by itself.
Great, thank you. And I suppose, is that the best way to sort of find out about if the company's ethics are being reflected in the workplace as well? Because again, companies can be sometimes very visual about the ethics that they are presenting, but the work isn't actually happening behind the scenes. So is that the best way as well to find out about that side of things?
Yeah, so those would be either your questions to the ex-employee or your questions in the interview. Tell me how, your value that you put on your website of ethical leadership, how that is, implemented throughout the organization in practice. What are some of the things that prove ethical leadership is actually being adhered to? And you can just ask that straight out. You're really wanting to see the practice, not the words. So this again is the tell me, don't tell me, show me.
Yeah, definitely.
So
it's the one that I think it's probably one that a lot of people don't think of when they're in the interview and with the stress. But actually, it's some really good questions at the end of the interview when the interviewer says, "Have you got any questions?" That's the perfect time for you to ask all these questions and have it stored, because it's the worst time is to think of it on the spot because your mind goes blank. So yeah, having these questions is perfect.
Yeah, maybe get 2 or 3 of questions that you've interchanged, right? That you just always have at the ready. You don't want to ask too many questions in the interview probably, but if they're the right company for you, they're going to want to hear those questions, right? They're going to want to know that it's the right fit for you too.
Yeah, definitely. Great. I think that's all the questions about sort of finding the right career for you. But again, if anyone has any, just pop them in the chat and I will hand back to Millie.
Yeah, so I think kind of leading on from finding that right career with job hunting, it's nice to have the option of 3 different employers that you can research and things like that. But let's say I've applied for 20 jobs, and I know when I graduated, this was very much how I felt. I've applied for 20 jobs. I've not heard anything positive back. I might not have even heard anything back. What am I doing wrong? Is it me? What should I be doing with my job applications? How many should I be doing in a week? Things like that.
Yes. So this is one of the big myths, that that you need to be, spray gunning it and applying everywhere to anyone, as many as you can get through the door, out the door every week. It's similar to that 80-20 rule about the networking and the job boards, right? We want to do fewer applications, better quality applications. We want to do that research. We want to connect to human beings in the organization. We want to really we want to take our time and be very intentional about it, rather than it being, oh, quick, another job application out the door. I can put that on my list of, numbers. So it's counterintuitive, but we want to do fewer applications to more pointed and specific target types of organizations. So being more selective about where we're going to apply, and then spending that extra time that you're not doing on all those 20 applications in making that one application really solid. And part of that is reaching out to somebody in the organization and trying to get an internal person to speak to you and that you could weave into your cover letter. You increase your chances by 60% if you know someone on the inside. So just applying directly through LinkedIn or through, a portal. I mean, some companies, they won't talk to you. I know in the US now, a lot of them are like, we're not allowed to talk to anybody because it's, for diversity and inclusion and trying to make things equitable. But try your best to contact someone on the inside, and LinkedIn is your best tool to find those people. I think in some ways it's a numbers game, in that you just need that one, right? That one good fit, right? And so it's kind of like dating. You got to go out and kiss a bunch of frogs, and then, you get your prince or your princess. And at the same time, we don't want to spread ourselves too thin with too many applications. So I think maybe changing your target your weekly assignment to yourself. It could be, I'm going to do 3 really quality job applications and spend 5 hours on each. And I'm going to talk to, 3 people in each of those organizations before I do that. And setting those kinds of targets for yourself versus the spray gun approach of, I just need to get as many out the door as possible, because it doesn't work. And it feels really deflating when you're not getting any positive feedback. You're not getting the hits from those. It could be you're not applying to the right level roles as well. I've seen that a lot. People apply to things that are more junior than they are, and then they don't get the calls back. And they're like, I could so do that job in my sleep. Why am I not getting the call? And it's because we don't want to hire people that are overqualified. So that's another myth. Recruiters will not hire you if you're overqualified. We don't want to have to manage that. You're going to leave too quickly. You're going to be going to want to raise. You're going to be, difficult with your manager. I don't know. So we don't usually bite on the people that are kind of underselling themselves. So just make sure that you're applying at the right level as well, which will also hopefully get you fewer applications, but more quality.
Absolutely. I think that's really important as well, because I know when I graduated, I was just like, I just need a job. I just need anything, someone please. And actually, if I'd taken that time to think, where is my value? I've got my degree now and I have XYZ experience. I'm going to apply to something that's going to make a difference for me and for them as well. I think that's really important. But also, when you get those no's, how would you deal with those? Kind of actually know you are overqualified, or no, you're not the right fit. How would you deal with that rejection?
Good question. In fact, I wrote a whole TED talk on this, but I haven't delivered it to TED yet. But it was called Reject Rejection. Because you have a choice every time you're rejected, whether it's from a bank account you tried to open, or you asked someone out on a date, or it's a job application, whatever it is. All of us are getting rejected all the time, if you think about it, right? We even reject ourselves by looking in the mirror and going, oh, I don't like that, So rejection is just part of life, isn't it? So it's, how do you respond to that rejection with a mantra or a comment back to yourself? Because again, this is all in your own head of how you're going to want to respond. That will fuel you to go on to the next one. So it could be something like, if they don't want me, do I really want them? Or, well, I guess the girl or the guy that got that job will be happy in it, but maybe I wouldn't have been. So I'm going to go on to the next one. Whatever it is that you want to tell yourself that's going to kind of up you, keep moving, go on to the next one. So you don't want to linger on that too long. And I think that can also be, if you have 20 rejections in a week, that's going to start to kind of build up on your confidence, bring down your confidence. So you're going to need a plan to what's going to happen when you get that rejection email. What are you going to tell yourself? Maybe write down a few statements. Who are you going to call? Maybe it's your best friend that always makes you happy. What are you going to do? Maybe it's, go drink that Diet Coke that you weren't supposed to have another one today. Whatever it is, right? Just do something that's going to get you rewarded for having put in the effort, but also let it go and you're moving on to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good advice. And I think rewarding yourself for actually taking the leap to contact someone is so important, because I know that the rejection can get quite overwhelming. And actually, you've put in so much work. You've done the CV, you've done the cover letter, you've gone so far. Why beat yourself up at that final hurdle?
Don't forget, you're going to have a template CV and cover letter that you're going to use most of the time, that you're just going to be tweaking slightly. And the actual investment of time for each application is in the people that you're going to be and the research that you're going to be doing. So you shouldn't have to be kind of, doing a full application for each of these if you've got your target audience identified well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we have any questions that I can see. So I'll hand over. Oh, I take that back. We do have a question. So how to deal with companies reaching out for a future job opening after initial rejection, which is quite an interesting one, actually.
What do you mean? So
I believe, and please do correct me if I'm wrong here, you've reached out to a company, they've rejected you for the job that you have applied for, but then they get back in touch with you and say, we have another job opening that you might be suited to.
Fantastic. Celebrate.
Yeah.
They saw your value. You weren't the right fit for that role, but you were the right fit for the organization. That's a huge compliment. Absolutely.
Brilliant. So take it well.
That's an ideal, that's like the best rejection you can get, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant.
Fantastic.
So on that positive note, I will pass over to Siddharth for hiring managers.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And it actually kind of works out well, because the myth that we've got with hiring managers and agencies and recruiters is actually, once my CV is ready, I'll just fire it off to every recruiting manager I know and kind of hope, and I should basically get a job. I fit most minimum requirements, and hopefully something will fall my way, which I know a couple of people that have done that too. So that's the myth that we're kind of looking at.
Yes. Okay. So I think most of you probably already know the answer to what I'm going to say on this one, but I'll give it a go anyway. So recruiters work for the companies, not for the candidates. So they're not going to find you a job. They would put you into their database for potential future roles, because we do use our database and our LinkedIn. So you'd want to link in with them for sure. Again, as our resource to go out and find the talent when we have it, when we have an actual opening. But they are not going to do any talking to you or dealing with you or interacting with you unless they have an opening that you fit, that's currently open. So the best way to work with recruiters is when there is an opening that you do fit and that you can help them help their client by filling that role. Okay, so they are a hiring manager is basically how you have to look at it. They are not going to be helping you to find the right fit, but you're going to help them to, potentially be that right fit for the company. So it is good to make relationships with recruiters, get in their databases, get linked in with them, and maybe be selective about which types of recruiters, if there's a specialism that you have or a sector that you want, or a type of organization. Usually certain sectors use certain recruitment agencies. So like I mentioned, Acre as one, but there's many out there now within sustainability and ESG. So you'd want, I think, to connect with all of them, but without this false pretense that they're going to somehow do anything for you, right? And you're going to need to be the one keeping on top of their website, their job postings, and then you reach out if there's something live and that you think you really do fit. Recruitment agencies are less likely to give you a chance if you don't fit the role exactly, whereas hiring managers within a company are more lenient on that. So just be wary if there's an external agency filling a role, it might be a little harder to kind of get a little bit of that leeway if you're making any kind of change or you're trying to kind of break in and you don't tick all the boxes. Recruitment agencies really want, it just needs to match almost exactly, right? So yeah, again, it's about win-win. So I know a lot of the recruiters that I've worked with, they want the next sale, and their sale is a company who needs to hire someone. So if you've heard about a company that might have an opening that's not right for you, but that is just a friend or a family member or something, and you give them that lead, you've got goodwill with them, and that will go a long way. So again, it's about this kind of win-win. It's about a relationship. It's not just about an ask. And that goes a really long way with recruiters. Even if it doesn't come to fruition, you've shown that you're looking out for them and that you're kind of giving them a lead. So that's just something to keep in mind as a way, if you hear of things like that in the market, job leads, job openings potentially coming, which we call the hidden jobs market. Sometimes they're not even posted externally, or they're not posted yet. That's a great time for a recruiter to go in and try to position themselves. So giving them those kind of silent, quiet, hidden leads are worth a lot.
And that actually kind of leads into a question we had pre-submitted, which is that how do I convince recruiters that even though I don't come with a lot of traditional experience, I am a very fast learner, especially in sustainability space. Please note, I'm trying to get a job as a junior sustainability consultant.
Great. Again, you got to go back to the story you're going to tell. So we're not just going to hire you for being a fast learner, which is a good thing, but we want to see what your skill set is. So if you're trying to go into consulting, it's going to be, can you do project management? Can you do a PowerPoint presentation? Can you work well and build relationships and trust with clients? Can you work in a team? Can you do data analysis? There's lots of different skills that we're going to want to be ticking off the box, even if they're outside of the context of sustainability. And so that's the most important thing, is the skills you have or that you're positioning, show that you can actually pretty much do the job, even though you're going to have to learn a lot on the job, of course, as well. The knowledge piece is around the issues around sustainability. So what is that consultancy? What kinds of clients do they have? And what kinds of sustainability issues are those clients concerned with? What kinds of regulatory requirements do they have to be able to report against? A lot of consultancies now are focused mostly on helping companies to report to meet the regulatory requirements. And you'll see there's lots of consultancies now hiring for exactly that. So even if you don't know all the regulations, but you know enough, you can talk about TCFD, or you can talk about scope 3 emissions or net zero or some of this lingo, and you know enough because you've researched it, you've followed people on LinkedIn, maybe do your own blog on it and put that on your resume. You've got to be able to tell us what you do know, even if you think there's a little bit of a gap, because we can take the knowledge that you do have with the skill set that you've got and say, we'll give you enough of a chance. You're not an expert in sustainability, and maybe you're not a consultant already, but you got the skills and you've got some knowledge and you've shown that initiative and that interest in those issues. So we'll give you a chance. So that can be enough, but you've got to do that, at least that bit, or there's nothing for us to kind of work from as hiring manager.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A section, and we've got a few minutes. So if anyone has any more questions, this would be the right moment.
I've also put a few to one side as well, from the chat as we were going through.
Oh, amazing.
One that was quite interesting was, is it okay to apply for more than one role at the same organisation? And the key part of that is one more senior than the other.
I have a client right now that's just done that, actually. She's quite senior, but she's gone for 2 levels. And she was asking, well, are those 2 hiring managers even talking to each other? Like, do they even know, right? So it depends a little bit on the size of the company. I think it's a personal choice. I don't think I don't want to give advice on that one, to be honest, because I think it depends on the size of the company. It depends, again, on who you've talked to within the organization. I think you need to do your research. Which level is the right level? Which role is the right role for you? And really do a quality application for the one that is the better level. It's not likely that they're both going to be the right level for you. So you need to do that decision-making rather than putting that on the company or the recruiter to try to figure out which level you should be at. So if I see somebody coming in for 2 different levels, it makes me think they were lazy. They didn't really know which ones they wanted, which level they're good at. They're kind of either underselling themselves or overselling themselves. And they don't really know who they are. So not really sure. So I think it's better to go for one and really have done your research about it. My first job in London into sustainability when I graduated from my master's was after WWF. I got into corporate consulting in London. And I applied to a role that I thought I was perfectly suited for, but it was a small consultancy. And the woman that was interviewing me knew that she was leaving, right? So she said, actually, I think you could do my job, which isn't posted yet. So they hired me in to take over from her. And then we hired someone else for the role I had applied for. Even though that role probably would have been fine. I mean, I probably wouldn't have been in it long, but it was the right level. But again, the company is going to hopefully help to look at that if there's that opportunity, you know, and it's not always the case. But I would say make sure you've applied to the role, the level that you think will challenge you a bit, but that you really can prove you're the top candidate for.
I have one more question, which is related to when you said with one of your roles, you sort of winged it to get your first job. And they were just wondering if you believe in luck or timing. So it's a bit of a random one, but it's just sort of like how much is that and how much of it is preparation, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everything, again, back to my dating analogy, right? Like everything in life is luck and timing. But I think in this space, I probably would say less luck. I would say in the order of that, it's about preparation. And I always say preparation, prepare, prepare, prepare. It's the most important thing you can do. And we can spot as recruiters, lazy job seekers a mile away. And we can spot the people that put in the effort and did the extra bits of talking to somebody in the organization, writing that love letter, doing the research on our keywords, you know, all the bits that I'm talking about. And so that we really feel like you are the right fit for this role and this organization. So, you know, if you leave it to luck, you might be unemployed for a long time. Timing, I don't know. I think timing, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I looked on LinkedIn, there's 200 applicants already. I need to get it in tomorrow. And I say, slow down. The job isn't closed. Let's do a good quality application rather than rushing it, because it's likely those 200 LinkedIn applicants are not that good. And that is the case oftentimes, by the way. So LinkedIn makes you all freaked out and scared that you're like, has so much competition, but those people are usually just hitting an auto apply button. They're not doing the actual application. So, you know, I do think it is about timing to some degree. You want to get it in before the deadline. But we will always be looking at top candidates if we haven't found the person we want, you know, all the way up to that end point. So I'd say prepare, do your research, do the heavy lifting for the recruiter, build relationships with people. Don't make it too much of a numbers game, and just stay positive and have that, you know, really core positive messaging to yourself about the value that you're bringing. You're the commodity, you're the product, you're the service. That organization needs you, and there is a place for you. You just need the one, the one job.
We've got a couple questions in here now. The first one's actually quite straightforward. Is your phone number and address necessary in a CV?
Address, absolutely not. I would never put an address on a CV.
Mm-hmm.
Phone number, yes. That would annoy me if I couldn't reach you by phone and I needed to. So yes, phone number and email. You don't have to put all your social media handles on there. You can maybe put your LinkedIn if your name isn't that searchable, but that would be it.
Brilliant. And then this is an interesting one, actually. So how to best handle an interviewer who talks for most of the interview and doesn't actually leave much time for the candidate to answer questions.
Do you want the job? No way. I mean, interviewing and recruitment, it's all about, it's like the swooning time, right? We're swooning you to come work for us. And if that's going to be your hiring manager, that's going to be your manager. I don't think you want the job. They are there to impress you as much as you to impress them.
Absolutely. Be wooed, right?
Be wooed.
Brilliant. And so this is the last one here, which is how can you reach out to ex-employees on LinkedIn without it seeming like cold calling?
Well, cold calling is if you're trying to sell something. So it's not cold calling. And again, back to the win-win. What can you offer them? Is there anything you can help them with? What organization are they currently at? You know, is there anything else you can you can help them with on any level, I don't know, but you just have to go for it. You just have to, go and ask, but you need to be, again, clear about what your value is and make yourself interesting to them so that they're willing to talk to you. So it's like a little mini love letter, right, to those types of people.
Amazing. Well, I think that's the end of all the questions that have been sent in. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any more, but everyone seems to be very, very thankful. And Shannon, that was amazing. You've given all of us, I think, a lot to think about and keep in mind when potentially applying or looking at applicants. And yeah, there's been so much content. So thank you so much for your time and for everything. And once again, to everyone that attended, thank you for your time. We will be sending out a link to the video and all the relevant links as well as the slides afterwards. So feel free to keep an eye on your email, and that'll be coming out and it'll all be on YouTube. But once again, thanks everyone for your time, especially to you, Shannon, where it was fantastic. I think all three of us had a brilliant time. So have a great afternoon, and it was lovely to spend some time with you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for